I could not believe what I was hearing. My hands trembled as I stood frozen outside our home office door, the velvet box containing a 4-carat diamond ring still in my pocket. Jessica, my fiancée of 3 months, was giggling into her phone about how she would marry me, divorce me after a year, take half my assets, and run back to someone named Jake. The floor seemed to disappear beneath my feet. The woman I thought was my soulmate had been plotting all along to destroy me. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from, and click that like and subscribe button as I reveal how I uncovered my fiancée's betrayal and the perfect revenge that followed. My name is Wyatt Anderson, 32 years old, and the founder of SecureShield, a cybersecurity software company I built from the ground up after graduating from Stanford with a computer science degree. It had been a long road of 80-hour weeks, living on ramen noodles in a studio apartment and reinvesting every penny back into the business. But finally, after 8 years of relentless work, my company received a $15 million valuation last quarter. I had purchased a beautiful home in an upscale suburban neighborhood, drove a Tesla Model S, and finally felt like all my sacrifices were paying off. Throughout my life, people had always described me as honest, straightforward, and perhaps too trusting. My father always said my willingness to see the best in people was both my greatest strength and my biggest weakness. That character trait would soon be tested in ways I never imagined. I met Jessica Barnes at a charity fundraiser for orphan children. I had recently started donating to causes I cared about, and education for disadvantaged kids was at the top of my list. She was working the event as part of the public relations team that organized it. Jessica was 28 with chestnut hair that fell in perfect waves past her shoulders, piercing green eyes, and a smile that lit up the entire ballroom. What captured me even more than her beauty was her apparent passion for helping children. When she approached me to thank me for my donation, we instantly connected. She was intelligent, witty, and seemed to share my values about giving back. I asked for her number before the night was over, and she agreed to dinner the following weekend. Our first date was at an upscale Italian restaurant downtown. I still remember how stunning she looked in her black cocktail dress, and how easily conversation flowed between us. We talked about everything from our childhoods to our career ambitions. Jessica told me she grew up in a middle-class family in Oregon, worked hard to put herself through college, and was determined to make a name for herself in the public relations world. After dinner, we walked along the riverfront and talked until midnight. Our second date was a picnic at the national park, where Jessica packed an impressive spread of gourmet sandwiches, fruit, and wine. By our third date, a concert of my favorite jazz band, I was already falling hard for her. She seemed perfect in every way. 6 blissful months flew by. Jessica and I became inseparable, and when I asked her to move into my home, she enthusiastically agreed. Living together only deepened our bond, or so I thought. We took a magical vacation to Hawaii, where we swam with dolphins, hiked volcanic trails, and made love under the stars. Jessica met my parents and sister during a family gathering, and they welcomed her with open arms. My mother later called to tell me how lovely Jessica was and how happy she was that I had found someone special. Jessica always showed interest in my work, asking thoughtful questions about my business, and seeming genuinely proud of what I had accomplished. She began asking more detailed questions about my company finances, investment portfolio, and future business deals. At the time, I found her interest endearing. I believed we were building a life together, so I openly shared everything with her. I had nothing to hide and wanted her to feel fully included in my life. After we had been together for a year, I knew Jessica was the woman I wanted to spend my life with. She was beautiful, supportive, and seemed to love me completely. I spent weeks searching for the perfect engagement ring, finally selecting a stunning 4-carat diamond set in platinum that cost $65,000. I wanted to give her something as special as she was to me. I arranged an elaborate proposal on a private yacht I chartered for the evening. With the city skyline twinkling in the background, a private chef serving her favorite seafood dishes, and a string quartet playing softly, I got down on one knee and asked Jessica to be my wife. Tears streamed down her face as she said yes. I slipped the ring onto her finger, and she threw her arms around me, sobbing that this was the happiest moment of her life. I believed every word. Soon after our engagement, I began noticing subtle changes in Jessica's behavior. She suddenly became eager to set a wedding date as soon as possible, saying she did not want a long engagement. When I casually mentioned that my lawyer had suggested a prenuptial agreement given my business assets, Jessica became uncharacteristically upset. Her eyes flashed with anger as she accused me of not trusting her and questioned if I was already planning for our marriage to fail. Not wanting to upset her, I quickly dropped the subject. My best friend Tony, whom I had known since college, pulled me aside at our engagement celebration. With concern in his eyes, he said something about Jessica did not seem right to him. He mentioned how she had changed the subject abruptly when he asked about her family, and how he caught her rolling her eyes when I was talking to my parents. I dismissed his concerns as jealousy or overprotectiveness. Jessica was perfect, and I was lucky to have found her. Tony was just being paranoid. At least that is what I told myself. As the weeks passed following our engagement, I began noticing Jessica taking phone calls in another room, her voice dropping to a whisper whenever I walked nearby. Several times I entered a room to find her quickly ending a call or putting her phone away. When I asked who she was talking to, she would smile and say it was work, her mother, or a friend discussing wedding plans. Weekends became filled with mysterious errands and appointments that Jessica needed to handle alone. When I offered to join her, she would kiss me quickly and insist it was boring stuff I would not enjoy. I tried to ignore the growing unease in my gut. After all, we were planning a wedding. It made sense she would have things to take care of. One evening, I accidentally overheard part of a conversation as I passed by the bathroom. Jessica was saying something about it being difficult to keep up the act, and how she could not wait until it was over. When I asked her about it later, she laughed and explained she was talking to her coworker about a difficult client presentation. Her explanation made sense, but something in her eyes did not match her words. Then came the text message that first cracked my perfect reality. I was using Jessica's phone to order takeout while she was in the shower since my phone had died. A message notification popped up from someone named Jake that read, "Miss you too, baby. Cannot wait to see you this weekend." When Jessica emerged from the bathroom, I casually asked who Jake was. Without missing a beat, she said he was her cousin who was passing through town. I nodded and pretended to believe her, but doubt had firmly taken root. The following month, Jessica told me she needed to visit her family for the weekend. She packed an overnight bag and kissed me goodbye, promising to call when she arrived. That evening, while organizing some papers in our home office, I found a hotel receipt that had fallen out of her purse before she left. It was for a reservation at a luxury hotel, just 30 miles away, not in her hometown, 5 states away as she had claimed. When she returned Sunday night glowing and relaxed, I asked how her family was doing. She launched into elaborate stories about her mother's garden and her father's new woodworking hobby. The lies flowed so easily from her lips that I almost doubted the evidence in my desk drawer. When I casually mentioned the name of the hotel from the receipt, asking if she had ever stayed there, she did not even flinch before saying no, she had never heard of it. She explained the receipt must have been from a client meeting she had organized. I began searching for more evidence, checking her drawers when she was out, scrolling through her phone when she was sleeping, and even driving by her office to verify she was where she claimed to be. I hated who I was becoming, but the inconsistencies in her stories were piling up. Still, I found nothing concrete enough to confront her with. I told myself I was being paranoid, that wedding stress was making me irrational. I tried to push my suspicions aside and focus on our future together. Then came the night that shattered my world completely. I had been on a 3-day business trip to Seattle and decided to fly home a day early to surprise Jessica. It was just after 8 p.m. when my Uber dropped me off at our house. I noticed all the lights were on, which meant Jessica was home. I quietly unlocked the front door, planning to surprise her with the small gift I had picked up, a pair of sapphire earrings that matched her engagement ring. As I walked through the house, I heard Jessica's voice coming from the home office. She was speaking loudly, obviously on the phone, and laughing in a way I had not heard in months. I paused outside the door, gift box in hand, not intending to eavesdrop but frozen by something in her tone. "Yes, everything is on track," she was saying, her voice filled with excitement. "The wedding is set for June, so by next July, I can file for divorce and walk away with at least $7 million. His company alone is worth $15 million, and California is a community property state. Do the math." My blood turned to ice as she continued. "The prenup discussion has been shut down. He is so desperate to make me happy, he dropped it immediately when I got upset. What an idiot." There was a pause, then Jessica laughed again. "Of course I do not love him, Jake. You know you are the only one for me. But Wyatt has what we need to set ourselves up for life. 1 year, playing the devoted wife, is a small price to pay. Once I get my settlement, we can move to the Bahamas like we always talked about." Another pause. "He suspects nothing. He is so trusting it is almost too easy. Sometimes I almost feel bad for him." She laughed again. "Almost." I backed away from the door, my mind racing and my heart shattering into a million pieces. The earrings fell from my hand, the small box making a soft thud on the carpet. I retrieved it quickly, then slipped out of the house as quietly as I had entered. Jessica never knew I had been there. I drove aimlessly for hours, her words replaying in my mind like a nightmare I could not wake from. The woman I loved, the woman I had planned to spend my life with, had been playing me from the beginning. Our entire relationship was a calculated con, and I had fallen for it completely. Eventually, I ended up at Tony's apartment. When he opened the door and saw my face, he immediately pulled me inside. Through broken sentences and occasional tears I could not hold back, I told him everything I had overheard. Rather than saying, "I told you so," Tony poured me a stiff drink and listened. "You cannot confront her yet," he said when I had finished. "If she knows you are onto her, she will either try to manipulate you into believing it was a misunderstanding, or she will accelerate her plan. We need more evidence, and you need a strategy." That night I slept on Tony's couch, though sleep is generous. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, Jessica's cruel laughter and callous words playing on repeat in my mind. How had I been so blind? How had I not seen through her act? The woman I thought would be the mother of my children was nothing but a skilled con artist who had targeted me for my money. The next day I contacted a private investigator recommended by my company's head of security. Mark Davis was a former FBI agent who specialized in fraud cases. I told him everything and hired him on the spot. Within a week he had compiled a file that confirmed my worst fears and revealed even more shocking information. Jessica had been meeting regularly with a man named Jake Reynolds at the hotel where I found the receipt. Surveillance photos showed them kissing in the parking lot and entering a room together. Background checks revealed that Jake had a criminal record for fraud and had served 18 months in prison for a romance scam that targeted wealthy widows. Most devastating of all, Mark uncovered evidence that Jessica and Jake had been in a relationship for over 3 years. They had systematically targeted me after reading about my company's funding round in a business journal. There were emails between them discussing how to hook the tech guy and strategizing how Jessica could best position herself as my perfect match. They had researched my interests, my charitable giving, even the types of women I had dated in the past. As I flipped through the file, looking at photos of them laughing together, reading their calculated plans to destroy me, something inside me hardened. The heartbreak was still there, but now it was overshadowed by a cold, focused anger. They had underestimated me. They thought I was just a naive, lovesick fool who would be easy to manipulate. They were about to learn how wrong they were. With the devastating truth now confirmed, I knew I needed a careful plan. I consulted with my attorney, Sarah Winters, who specialized in high-net-worth divorce cases. I laid out everything I had discovered and asked for her guidance. "First things first," Sarah said, pushing her glasses up her nose. "Do not let her know you are aware of her scheme. Continue as normal while we put protections in place." Over the next 2 weeks, I made strategic moves to shield my assets. I created a new holding company and transferred significant business interests to it. I updated my will and removed Jessica as the beneficiary of my life insurance policy. I changed the passwords on all my financial accounts and quietly moved important documents to a safe deposit box. Throughout all of this, I maintained a painful charade at home. I smiled at Jessica, kissed her goodbye each morning, and discussed wedding plans in the evening. I watched her pretend to love me while knowing she was texting Jake whenever I left the room. Every "I love you" from her lips now sounded like "I will take everything you have worked for" to my ears. But I smiled back and said, "I love you too." I placed legal recording devices in our home office and living room, careful to comply with state laws about surveillance. Day after day, I collected more evidence of her deception. I recorded calls where she mocked me to Jake, detailed their plans for spending my money, and even laughed about how easy I was to manipulate. One evening, Jessica suggested we begin planning our engagement party. "We should do something really special," she said, curled against me on the couch. "Maybe rent out that new rooftop venue downtown. We could invite everyone important to us." I stroked her hair, fighting the revulsion I felt at her touch. "That sounds perfect," I said, an idea forming. "Let's go all out. Money is no object for celebrating our love." Jessica's eyes lit up with poorly disguised greed. She kissed me deeply, and I forced myself to respond as if I still believed in our relationship. "You are the best, babe," she whispered. "I cannot wait to be Mrs. Anderson." I could not wait either, but for entirely different reasons. Over the next month, I threw myself into planning what Jessica thought was our engagement party. I rented the grand ballroom at the Crescent Hotel, the most exclusive venue in the city. I hired an award-winning chef, a string quartet, and a photographer known for shooting celebrity events. Jessica was delighted with each extravagant detail, never questioning why I was so invested in the party planning. "Invite anyone you want," I told her. "Family, friends, colleagues, everyone who matters to you should be there." She created a guest list that included her parents, siblings, friends, and co-workers. I noticed she had added a Jake Wilson to the list, claiming he was a childhood friend. I pretended not to notice or care. My guest list included my family, close friends, business associates, and several specific individuals. Jessica did not know Detective James Russell from the Financial Crimes Division, a reporter from the business section of our local newspaper, and Emily Chen, a district attorney who specialized in fraud cases. I told Jessica they were all business connections. The night of the party arrived. Jessica looked stunning in a designer gown I had purchased for her, the 4-carat engagement ring sparkling on her finger. She was radiant, working the room like the social pro she was introducing me to her parents and friends as the man of her dreams. I smiled and played along, knowing what was coming. I spotted Jake across the room watching Jessica with poorly concealed possessiveness. He was exactly as the surveillance photos had shown, tall with carefully styled hair and an expensive watch that was likely purchased with money from previous scams. When Jessica introduced us, he shook my hand firmly and congratulated me, his eyes never quite meeting mine. "So glad you could join us, Jake," I said warmly. "Jessica tells me you two go way back." "Oh yeah, we grew up together," he lied smoothly. I would not miss this for the world. As the evening progressed, the ballroom filled with nearly 200 guests. The champagne flowed freely, the music played softly, and everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves. Jessica was in her element, soaking up the congratulations and admiration, no doubt, calculating the eventual financial payoff of her performance. At 9:30 p.m., I clinked my glass and moved to the small stage at the front of the ballroom. The music stopped, and all eyes turned to me. Jessica stood front and center, beaming up at me with practiced adoration. "Thank you all for coming tonight." I began, my voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "It means the world to have everyone we care about in one room to celebrate our engagement." I looked directly at Jessica, whose smile widened in anticipation of what she thought would be a loving speech. "When I met Jessica at that charity event last year, I thought I had found my soulmate," I continued. "She was everything I had ever wanted, and I fell completely in love with her. Jessica blew me a kiss, playing her part perfectly. But sometimes I said, my tone shifting slightly. The people we trust the most are not who they appear to be. A subtle murmur went through the crowd. Jessica's smile faltered slightly. Before we continue this celebration, I thought it might be interesting to share some recordings I recently discovered. I nodded to Tony at the sound booth, and suddenly Jessica's voice filled the ballroom. The wedding is set for June, so by next July I can file for divorce and walk away with at least $7 million. His company alone is worth $15 million, and California is a community property state. Do the math. Jessica's face drained of color as her own words continued to play. Of course I do not love him, Jake. You know you are the only one for me. But Wyatt has what we need to set ourselves up for life. The crowd gasped collectively. Jessica's mother covered her mouth in shock. Jake started edging toward the exit but found Tony and 2 security guards blocking his way. I gestured to the large screen that descended from the ceiling. And here are some interesting emails between Jessica and her actual boyfriend, Jake Reynolds, who is standing right there. I pointed directly at Jake, who froze like a deer in headlights. You might recognize Jake from his mugshot after his last fraud conviction. The screen displayed their emails discussing their plans alongside Jake's criminal record. Phones came out as guests began recording the spectacle unfolding before them. Jessica and Jake targeted me over a year ago. I explained to the stunned crowd. They researched my interests, my habits, my financial status. Everything about our relationship was a calculated plan to marry me, divorce me, and take half of everything I have worked for. Jessica finally found her voice. Wyatt, baby, this is not what it looks like. She stammered, tears streaming down her face. I can explain everything. There is nothing to explain, I replied calmly. I have hours of recordings, emails, text messages, and surveillance photos. I know exactly who you are and what you were planning. I turned back to our guests. I apologize for the unusual engagement party, but I thought it was important that everyone see the truth before any more damage could be done. Jessica's father stepped forward, his face twisted with anger and embarrassment. Jessica, is this true? She looked wildly around the room, seeing nothing but shocked and disgusted faces. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled completely. Daddy, I can explain, she sobbed. Meanwhile, Detective Russell had moved to Jake's side, speaking quietly to him. Jake's face had gone ashen. I removed the microphone from its stand and walked down to stand directly in front of Jessica. The engagement is off, I said, holding out my hand. I will take the ring back now. Her hand trembling, Jessica slowly pulled the diamond ring from her finger and placed it in my palm. As our eyes met, I saw not remorse for what she had done, but fury that her plan had failed. You will regret this, she hissed quietly so only I could hear. I smiled slightly. Not as much as you will, I replied before turning away from her forever. The aftermath of the engagement party was both painful and liberating. The story made the local news, with the business reporter I had invited writing a detailed article about the attempted fraud. Jessica and Jake both faced public humiliation and professional consequences. Jake was investigated for outstanding warrants in 2 other states, while Jessica was immediately fired from her PR firm when they learned of her deception. Jessica tried calling and texting me repeatedly in the days following the party. Her messages ranged from tearful apologies to angry accusations that I had deliberately humiliated her. I blocked her number and instructed my attorney to handle any further communication. When she showed up at my house crying and begging for another chance, I calmly asked her to leave and reminded her that I had enough evidence to pursue criminal charges if she continued to harass me. The hardest part was facing the emotional aftermath. Despite knowing the truth, part of me still mourned the future I had imagined with the woman I thought Jessica was. I had genuinely loved her, or at least the persona she had created to trap me. Some nights I would wake up reaching for her, only to remember the cruel reality. My friends and family rallied around me during this difficult time. Tony invited me on a fishing trip to get away from the city for a while. My sister called daily to check in, and my parents visited for 2 weeks, filling my home with warmth and genuine love, that helped remind me what real caring looked like. 3 months after the engagement party, I still found myself struggling with trust issues. Simple interactions like business meetings or coffee with new acquaintances became exercises in paranoia as I analyzed every word and gesture for signs of deception. Realizing I needed help processing the betrayal, I joined a support group for victims of relationship fraud. Hearing others share similar stories helped me understand I was not alone and gave me tools to begin healing. Throwing myself into work provided another lifeline. I channeled my pain into creativity and innovation, and SecureShield thrived as a result. We launched 2 new security products that were immediately successful, and I finalized a partnership with a major tech company that doubled our market reach. The company that Jessica and Jake had targeted for its value became even more valuable, ironically, because of the focus and determination their betrayal had sparked in me. Slowly, I began rebuilding my capacity to trust. I started with small steps like rekindling old friendships that had fallen by the wayside during my relationship with Jessica. I volunteered at the children's charity where we had first met, reclaiming the genuine passion for giving back that she had only pretended to share. Each positive interaction helped heal the wounds her deception had left behind. 8 months after the engagement party disaster, I received an unexpected email from Jessica's younger sister, Megan. We had always gotten along well, and she had been horrified by her sister's actions. She wrote to apologize again for what Jessica had done, and to let me know that Jessica had moved to Arizona to start over. According to Megan, Jessica had lost everything: her career, her reputation, her relationship with Jake, and even the support of many family members who remained angry about her behavior. The knowledge brought me no pleasure. I did not want Jessica to suffer. I had only wanted to protect myself and expose the truth. I replied to Megan thanking her for the update and wishing both her and Jessica well. I meant it sincerely, having learned that holding on to anger only extended the pain. A full year after discovering Jessica's plot, I had a chance encounter that brought the experience full circle. I had stopped at a small coffee shop in a neighboring town after a business meeting when I spotted her behind the counter, wearing the green apron of a barista. Our eyes met, and for a moment, neither of us moved. She looked different. Her designer clothes replaced by a simple uniform, her perfect makeup gone but somehow more authentic than I had ever seen her. Jessica served the customer ahead of me, then hesitantly approached the register when it was my turn. "Hi, Wyatt," she said softly, her eyes downcast. "Hello, Jessica," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us until she finally spoke again. "I owe you an apology. A real one. Not the fake ones I kept trying to give you after everything. I am truly sorry for what I did to you." I studied her face, looking for signs of the manipulation I had become so familiar with, but found only genuine regret. "What happened with Jake?" I asked. A bitter smile crossed her lips. "He took off with my savings the minute things went south. Turns out I was not the only one with an angle." I nodded, not surprised. "And how are you doing now?" "Starting over," she said, gesturing to her surroundings. "Working honest jobs, rebuilding relationships with my family, going to therapy, trying to be a better person." "I am glad to hear that," I said, and I meant it. "You know you could have pressed charges," she said quietly. "You had enough evidence. Why did you not?" I considered the question carefully. Exposing the truth was enough. I did not need revenge. As I paid for my coffee and turned to leave, Jessica called after me. "Wyatt, I hope you find someone who deserves you. Someone who actually loves you the way I pretended to." I nodded in acknowledgement and walked out, feeling an unexpected sense of closure wash over me. In the 1.5 years since Jessica came into my life, my company expanded internationally, opening offices in London and Singapore. The betrayal that could have destroyed me instead pushed me to grow both professionally and personally. I established a nonprofit foundation that provided resources and support to victims of romance scams and financial fraud, turning my painful experience into something that helped others. I eventually began dating again, approaching new relationships with caution, but not cynicism. I learned to balance healthy skepticism with openness to verify without becoming paranoid, and to recognize the difference between genuine connection and practiced manipulation. My experience with Jessica taught me to look beyond surface charm, to seek substance consistency and integrity in potential partners. The worst betrayal taught me the greatest lesson about love and trust. It is not about protecting yourself from ever getting hurt, but about choosing the right people to be vulnerable with. And for that painful but invaluable wisdom, I am strangely grateful. Have you ever experienced betrayal that eventually made you stronger? Share your story in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences that might help others going through similar situations. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes our most painful experiences lead to our greatest growth. Share this with someone who might need to hear that healing is possible after betrayal.